Hey there, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. There is some recent news about 3 RDOF auction winners that have yet to receive any funds. I'll be right back. Thanks for joining me. Rick Uzzi here with Zcorum. Been following RDOF. This is the reverse auction that the FCC did several years ago, where companies, service providers bid on certain areas, on certain census blocks, and it was a reverse auction. So they were bidding for how little money they would accept from the federal government in order to be able to deploy broadband in that specific area, and they need to deploy it universally in that census block. So lots of companies participated in that, and the FCC has released a lot of funds related to that, but they are still looking at some long-form applications, including some of the bigger winners in that. They're trying to do their due diligence there, and they've got questions about some of these. So I'm going to talk about that today. So there was a story, first off, here in the Wall Street Journal. It says, Vegas company promised fast internet. Rural America waits and waits. LTD Broadband won rights to $1.3 billion in federal funds to deliver broadband in parts of 15 states, then missed deadlines to qualify for money. So again, this was the RDOF reverse auction, where this money is actually not coming. This is not funded from tax dollars like, for example, the IIJA, the Infrastructure Act that just passed recently, or ARPA, any of those things. So this is funded through USAC, through the Universal Service Fund. That's that fee on your phone bill that was designed originally to help get telephone service deployed and to help with managing high-cost areas for telephone service across these rural areas. And they're trying to make this now more about broadband. And as far as where the money's going now, a lot of it's going to broadband through something like RDOF or through the CAF and Phase 1 and CAF 2 auctions. And then, but the thing that's missing right now is we're still collecting this money on phone lines, on fixed wire phone lines. So they need to do something about that. So this would be that USF money. It says here, the federal government launched a major initiative to provide high-speed internet service to rural Americans in 2020. Dedicating $9.2 billion to entice companies to extend their networks to places previously deemed too costly to reach. So, very similar to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, BEAD, those programs. It's the same thing. This was just earlier. More than 18 months later, many of those rural communities are still waiting for broadband. That's because a little-known Las Vegas company that won a bid to implement the program missed filing deadlines and failed to secure regulatory approvals needed to receive the money. They're talking about LTD Broadband. Excuse me. The 2020 Broadband Initiative by the FCC, the largest ever single allocation of its kind, drew bids from more than 300 companies, including cable giant Charter Communications and the Starlink unit of Elon Musk's SpaceX Corporation. The top dollar winner was LTD Broadband of Vegas, which won rights to $1.3 billion to extend fiber optic cable to rural communities scattered over 15 states, in some cases beating out local competitors. LTD has since missed deadlines to be certified by local regulators in 6 of the 15 states, prompting the FCC to block the company's access to the broadband funds there. At least 275,000 people live in affected areas of those states, census and FCC data show. LTD asked the FCC for more time to be certified, but the agency denied that request. LTD is appealing that FCC decision in 4 of the 6 states. I think it's down to 3 now, as we'll see here in a minute. In 9 other states, the FCC officials are still reviewing LTD's ability to do the job, even though the agency has authorized more than 300 other bidders to move forward. Corey Hauer, LTD's chief executive officer, blamed the missed deadlines on bad advice and actions by an outside lawyer. He said LTD has begun building fiber networks, even without the federal funds, and expressed optimism that officials will reconsider. So I wonder if they'll sue their lawyer. LTD, which Mr. Hauer said currently has 197 employees, was the low bidder in areas with a combined population of at least 860,000. Getting the $1.3 billion was contingent on the company demonstrating it had certifications from state telecom regulators, as well as the financial and technical wherewithal to complete the work. They were required to show FCC its eligible telecommunication carrier, or their ETC certifications, by June 7, 2021. The company petitioned the FCC for more time in 8 of 15 states. So these ETC designations were due way back in 2021. What that is if you are going to take money through RDOF, in addition to providing data service, you have to provide voice service. In order to provide voice service, you need to be a ETC in every state. So normally you would go to something like the Public Service Committee or Commission, and you'd fill out that paperwork and get it back. So the FCC was very clear, get that started very quickly. If you find out that that you've won your auction, so before the FCC even authorizes any money, if you found out you won the auction, you need to get that ETC designation in place. And LTD failed to do that in places here. So Mr. Howard said the company, acting on the advice of outside counsel, intentionally held off submitting some of the applications because it expected them to be opposed by competing internet providers and wanted to minimize the time opponents had to mount an attack. So I think what they're saying there is if we had applied for that ETC designation before the FCC announced anything publicly, let's say, then that would tip off our competitors and they'd immediately start, attacking us. I think that's going to fly. The FCC denied LTD's petition in 6 of those 8 states where it sought more time. That was California, Nebraska, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Iowa, and Kansas. It said LTD hadn't offered a compelling reason to waive a deadline established to expedite the provision of needed broadband service to these rural communities. The 6 states subsequently didn't certify LTD. Several cited errors and missteps by the company that heightened their concerns about its ability to execute a huge project. The California Public Service Commission said LTD had filed its application days before the June deadline and not in April, as LTD had said in its deadline extension request to the FCC. When state officials asked LTD about the discrepancy, a company representative sent back an application receipt dated April 26, a date which had been altered, according to a declaration to the FCC signed later by Christopher Toomey, an outside lawyer for LTD. In emails and an interview, Mr. Toomey acknowledged signing the declaration. He said he never intended the altered receipt to be sent to regulators. He said he created it to record the date he mailed LTD's paperwork before realizing in June that the state wasn't accepting mail applications. He said, "I deny that I've ever intentionally misled a federal or state regulator," he said, adding that LTD's failed applications were the result of decisions by state and federal officials, not his actions. LTD said it's no longer working with Mr. Toomey, which he didn't dispute, and I'm not surprised. So anyway, so LTD, biggest winner in RDOF, has yet to receive any money. You can see here that they're struggling, and when with all of this that's going on, to me, it doesn't seem likely that they're going to get any money from the FCC. The FCC says that they're still looking at the applications. They're still vetting everybody. So they haven't come out and said LTD's not getting any money. But obviously, these kinds of things don't help as the FCC looks at the applications and decides, do we go forward with this company? And this came out like the same day. LTD bails on RDOF build-out in California. LTD Broadband said it no longer plans to pursue federal funding for the construction of telecom networks in rural parts of California, while LTD continues to believe that the arguments raised in the petition that LTD filed have merit. It has become apparent that LTD will not be able to obtain ETC designation for the required census blocks within a reasonable time frame to allow it to meet its RDOF obligations. So that's one of the states that they mentioned that they're now pulling out of that as well. Another story related to RDOF, Resound Networks again touts gigabit fixed wireless speeds. So there are a couple of companies that have said they want to do this via fixed wireless, and Resound is one that won a lot of money from this. I say won. They won the auction. They have not yet to receive any money. That's a similar situation as LTD, as the FCC is continuing to look at their long-form application and trying to determine, can they do this? And Resound is trying to make the case through some of these press releases that, hey, we can do this. So it says Resound Networks said today that it achieved gigabit download speeds and 500 meg upload speeds over distances of 7 miles using fixed wireless equipment and licensed and unlicensed spectrum bands. So the RDOF auction had a couple of different tiers that a service provider could bid for. They could do a low kind of speed and high latency. So there were different combinations they could do. And depending on how they bid, that would increase the weight of their bid. In other words, it would drag down their bid. So if they did a low speed and a low latency, or even a low speed and a high latency, then there was a certain weight that was assigned to their bid. And as the auction progressed, eventually that weight starts to take its toll. So if there's nobody else in there offering a gigabit kind of service, then they could be okay. If it's an area where maybe that's really difficult, then a bid, like a low speed bid could prevail because of the way the auction clock was designed. But as the bids went down further and further, it was harder to win. So a lot of people, almost everybody, bid as a gigabit provider, including fixed wireless providers. And fixed wireless and gigabit is something that's still kind of questionable. And they're trying to come out here and say, yeah, we can do this. Resound was one of the largest bidders in the RDOF auction, but the FCC has not yet authorized the company's funding. Opponents have expressed concern about the ability of fixed wireless technology to consistently achieve gigabit speeds in rural areas, especially at scale on live networks. And that is something to consider is, okay, you can do a test in a controlled situation, a certain amount of distance, really good weather conditions, those kinds of things. No, line of sight, and nothing in the way. But how does it work when you then need to roll it out to a mass number of subscribers in a production situation? So you got more people on the network, you've got more places where things can go wrong. In the latest testing, Resound used fixed wireless equipment from Globetel that, according to a press release, supports up to 10 gig for each 90-degree sector and can serve hundreds of subscribers from each 360-degree base station. Resound Networks was the 8th biggest winner in the RDOF auction. The company is slated to receive $311 million if it can persuade the FCC that it can meet performance requirements using gigabit fixed wireless. And I'm sure they're talking to the FCC behind the scenes and providing them with more information, but again, they're putting out this press to make everybody see that they are, testing this and making it work, and everything's looking good. Earlier this month, the company said that it achieved gigabit speeds using fixed wireless equipment in the 6 gigahertz band with an experimental license. The signal was sent more than 3 miles using 160 megahertz wide channels that will become available in the band. Resound, which was founded in 2015, is headquartered in Pampa, Texas, serves more than 400,000 homes in Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. So they're a good-sized provider, fixed wireless provider. Another big RDOF winner that plans to use gigabit fixed wireless but has not yet had its funding released is Nextlink Internet. They also have been touting the technology's ability to support RDOF performance requirements. The company said recently that it used a single 160 meg channel, the 6 gig band, to achieve downstream speeds of 1 gig and 500 meg upstream over a distance of 2 miles. Nextlink, which bid as AMG technology, tentatively won $429 million in the auction, making it the 6th largest winning bidder. So that's really 2 fixed wireless bidders that have yet to receive this money. But again, it's because they bid in the gigabit tier, and the FCC is still trying to make sense and understand if this is going to be something that's going to work at that tier. And then finally, we have SpaceX, Starlink. So these are the low Earth orbit satellites launched by SpaceX. Because they're low Earth orbit, they can provide faster speeds than your typical geosynchronous satellite services that are, 10 times as far up. I think it's 10 times. Let's see, like 300 miles versus 30,000 miles, more than 10 times. Isn't that right? Yeah. 300, yeah, more than 10 times. No, that's right, 10 times. Okay, math, head, can't quite get it right now. So I think it is 10 times. So the average download speed delivered to U.S. SpaceX Starlink satellite broadband subscribers increased 38% in the first quarter of 2022 compared to the same period a year earlier, according to Ookla, company responsible for a widely used broadband speed testing application. So Ookla is out there, and people can go, and if they want to see what their internet speed is, they can go to Ookla, and Ookla is tracking that, and I guess they track who the service provider is. I don't know if they track it by IP address that the customer is using or if they ask the customer, I'm not sure, but they're tracking these various providers. The median Starlink download speed was 90.5 megabits per second in 2020 compared with 65.7 megabits per second in 2021. As a comparison, the median download speed for all types of fixed broadband providers approached 150 megabits per second in the first quarter of 2022, according to Ookla. U.S. Starlink uplink speeds decreased 33% over the same period, however, dropping from 16.3 megabits per second to 9.3 megabits per second, while median latency increased marginally from 40 milliseconds to 43 milliseconds, Ookla said. So that latency, they're looking good. The latency for RDOF is 100 milliseconds or less, so they have no problems there. But with RDOF, you're supposed to be able to provide service of 100 by 20. So they've been over 100 a lot as they've done their tests, and sometimes they're not. And you can see here that they're not getting up to the 20 megabits per second on the upload. Now, this is Ookla data. I'll talk about that here in a second. So here you're looking at this chart that's showing Q1 2021 through Q1 2022, and you can see All providers have been consistently on the uptick here, especially starting around Q3 of 2021. And then you've got Starlink. As you look at them, they're kind of up and down. So you got Starlink Canada and Starlink US, and you can see you've kind of got an up and down pattern here. And what happens is that they launch their service, and the service is fast and responsive because they don't have that many subscribers on it. And then as they start to add subscribers, and those subscribers are using the bandwidth on those satellites, then the speeds will go down for everybody, and then they launch more satellites, which is probably what's happening here. They've been launching them fairly regularly. So they'll launch, I think it's like 60 at a time of these satellites that then go in a constellation, and they're constantly circling the Earth. They're not like a geosynchronous where it's just right up there in one spot. So they're circling the Earth, and their system, their terminal that they have, that the person puts on their house somewhere, is a antenna that then has electronics that aims it according to as the satellites move. So there's a phased array antenna in there. It's not a motor. It's basically a phased array antenna that takes the signal and kind of follows, it adjusts the signal and follows those satellites. And as it's following those satellites, as one leaves the area that they can see, the part of the sky that they can see, they pick up another one. So it's worked well. A lot of people are happy with it. And the reason they're happy with it is because they had really terrible service before. Maybe they had DSL and they were only getting 10 megabits per second. Maybe they didn't even have that. So they were able to get Starlink and they're getting good service, but it may not reach the level for something like an RDOF and RDOF situation. So the FCC is also looking at this information as well. And I'm sure Elon Musk or whoever is also talking to the FCC on the back end and saying, look, here's our information that we're getting from our subscribers. Because when you're looking at Ookla, again, this is just somebody going, I'm assuming this is somebody going to Ookla and saying, things seem slow, or things seem fast. Maybe maybe the people running these, I didn't think about this until just now, maybe the people running these speed tests for SpaceX are thrilled, right? So they were getting like really slow speeds before, and now they go to Ookla all the time and say, let me see what I'm getting today. Wow, this is awesome. I'm getting 70 megabits per second. Or I'm getting 90 megabits per second. So they could be really, really happy, right? But they're running these speed tests. And with something like Ookla, a speed test like that, it's out of the control of the service provider, because there's a lot that goes on between that Ookla speed test and then the server where Ookla lives that's doing the test. So first off, it's in the customer's house, right? So if they are on a Wi-Fi network and they're far away from their access point and they run that speed test, that's going to reduce the speed. And it's got nothing to do with SpaceX or Starlink. Same thing as if there's any kind of congestion on the internet between that customer and the Ookla servers. So while it is good, it's certainly reasonable to say you're comparing other broadband operators to Starlink, because they're all kind of having they have the same challenges, whether it's Wi-Fi. The other thing is, how many people are on the internet at the time that the person is doing a speed test. So if they're all having the same challenges, then this is a pretty good comparison. But it could be that Starlink's service, that Ookla is counting them as low because of these other factors or challenges. There's only, again, so much that Starlink controls. And a big part of that, I think, with these speed tests is the Wi-Fi network, because when most people complain about the speed of their internet service, and I know this because we provide 24/7 help desk for lots of internet providers. That's one of the things that we do. And the majority of calls that we get when people are complaining about the speed of their internet, it's the Wi-Fi network. It's not the connection. It's not the internet connection. It's on their network, and then we help them with that. Hey, looks like you need to get closer to your router, or maybe you can move your router, take it away from the fish tank, because water right next to your router can block the signal. So again, that's a big factor, I think, that determines that or that this is, again, good for comparison, not necessarily true to say that these are the speeds that these customers are getting, for sure, let's say. SpaceX Starlink speeds, it's important to note that the median speeds experienced in the first quarter of 2022 are below the speeds that SpaceX committed to delivering when it participated in the 2020 RDOF auction. And again, these are Ookla speeds, so take that with a grain of salt. SpaceX was tentatively awarded nearly $900 million in the auction, but the FCC has not yet authorized the company's funding. Opponents have argued that the funding should not go to SpaceX because the satellites have a lifespan of only about 5 years. That's another challenge for this service. So, he's wanting to get, he was saying at one point, like 30,000 of these satellites up there, covering the Earth. It seems like there's not going to be any more space up there. There's lots of space up there, though. So But that's how many he wanted to get up to be able to handle the demand that he thinks he's going to have. So by the time you get all these things up, in 5 years, they start deorbiting. They basically, that's the end of life. So you've got to, in addition to getting your new satellites up, you've got to be replacing these satellites. So in addition to that, making it harder to get your constellation up to where it needs to be, it's going to obviously increase the cost or their operating costs if they need to be thinking about every 5 years they got to start launching satellites, more satellites to replace ones that deorbit. Concerns have also been raised about the company's ability to meet the 100 megabit per second download and 20 meg upload speeds to which it committed, and the new Ookla data would seem to underscore those concerns. So, so these are things that I've thought about. What is the FCC going to do? Let's say they come out and they say, LTD Broadband, you've just been too flaky. We're not going to give you the money that you won. You just really have not operated. They might say you haven't operated on the up and up based on that possible falsified information, or maybe it's just that you've just not been organized enough, and we're concerned about your ability to do this. On the wireless guys that won a lot of money, maybe that you bid in the gigabit service, but we're just not confident that you're going to be able to maintain gigabit speeds, and we want to make sure that we have that. So they may, let's say they pull the rug out from all of those. That's a lot of areas, and that's a lot of money that's not going to be given out. What are they going to do with that? I've been wondering about that. I haven't heard an answer from them. So there's only a couple of things they could do. They could contact other bidders that bid in that area and say, do you want a shot at this? And let's get that done as quickly as possible. They could just say, we're done, okay, because we've got all this other money out there that's sitting out there. So we've got all this 42.5 billion in BEAD that's sitting out there that needs to be allocated. And the FCC, who's in control of RDOF, needs to get their map ready. So it could be that they just say, we're done with RDOF at this point. Those are USF funds. That's a totally different bucket of money. Maybe they say, hey, we're going to go ahead and apply this. I don't know if they can do that. I don't know if the government can do that. If they can say, okay, we're going to take money out of this pocket of RDOF, and we're going to put it over here and supplement BEAD and put all of that 9 billion into BEAD. So now it's more like 52 billion instead of 42 billion. I don't know if they can do that. Maybe they'll just say, we're not going to spend this money here, and we're going to apply the BEAD money to these areas. So that way, when they put the FCC maps together, all of these areas that we thought would be covered by RDOF are just going to be open on the map. So instead of an RDOF operator coming in there, having money and building it out, it'll still be on the map. It'll still be eligible as an unserved or underserved area. And then the states can determine the best way to fill those areas, the way that they would be doing that moving forward with the infrastructure money that they're going to be getting. So I think that's probably the more likely scenario, although who knows? What do I know, right? But that's, in my thinking, that might be the most likely scenario, is to just, award as much as they can. They'll continue to award the dollars, and it's like, okay, we think these people can all get these funds, but I don't think there's going to be another phase of RDOF. I could be wrong, but I think they'll just finish up what they can where they have these applications, and then they'll be done with it, because the government's trying to focus everything through NTIA now, if at all possible. So we'll see. All right. Thanks for joining me. If this was helpful, please give me a thumbs up on the video. If you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button. Click the little bell to be notified when we are live. And don't forget, we do offer services like help desk. So if you are a new internet service provider and you're trying to figure out how in the world am I going to help my customers once they get online, who's going to take those calls, and I don't know about all these things, we can do that for you, among lots of other things. So check us out, zquorum.com, send us an email, check out our website if you have questions. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.